The rain that night was relentless. It fell in thick sheets, drumming against the rooftops and cascading down the gutters of Riverdale. The streetlights struggled against the downpour, their weak amber glow casting a faint, uneven light across the slick streets. Neon signs from the nearby shops blinked intermittently, their reflections shimmering like fractured rainbows on the wet pavement. In the midst of this storm, tucked away on the corner of Maple Avenue, stood the Cozy Corner Cafe, a small sanctuary of warmth and light in an otherwise dreary world. Inside, Emma Carter wiped her hands on her frayed apron and glanced at the clock above the counter. It was nearing midnight, and the cafe was quieter than usual. The steady hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clatter of dishes punctuated the silence. Emma had been on her feet for 6 straight hours, her body aching from the endless routine of pouring coffee, taking orders, and cleaning tables. Yet, she carried on, her determination unwavering. After all, this job was her lifeline. At 26, Emma had become the backbone of her family. Her father's sudden passing 2 years ago had turned her world upside down, leaving her as the primary breadwinner. Her mother's health had deteriorated not long after, and her younger brother Liam, now in his final year of high school, relied on her for everything from school fees to advice about his future. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders, but Emma bore it with quiet grace, focusing on what she could do rather than dwelling on what she couldn't. The Cozy Corner Cafe had become more than just a workplace for Emma. It was her second home. The regulars who came in each night were like fleeting acquaintances in a story that rarely changed. Construction workers, office clerks, and the occasional insomniac. All of them shared the same tired expressions as they nursed their drinks and tried to stave off the world outside. Emma moved among them with practiced ease, offering warm smiles and brief conversations that, though fleeting, seemed to brighten their nights. That evening, the cafe was nearly empty. A few familiar faces sat at the counter, sipping coffee or picking at their meals. Emma took a moment to lean against the counter, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, when the sound of the doorbell jingling startled her. She looked up to see a man stepping inside, his figure outlined by the rain-soaked night. He was drenched, his thin jacket clinging to him like a second skin, and his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He stood just inside the door for a moment, as though unsure whether he had made the right decision by coming in. His eyes, tired and haunted, scanned the room before he made his way to a corner booth by the window. Emma watched him for a moment before straightening her apron and grabbing her notepad. She approached him with her usual smile, though she couldn't help but notice the way his hands trembled slightly as he rubbed them together. "Good evening," she said warmly. "What can I get for you?" The man looked up at her, his blue eyes catching the light for a brief moment. He seemed hesitant, as though even speaking required effort. "Just a coffee." "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded and turned back toward the counter. As she prepared his coffee, she found herself glancing over at him. He hadn't removed his wet jacket and sat hunched over, his gaze fixed on the window. There was something about him, something fragile and weary, that tugged at her heart. When she returned with his coffee, she noticed him fumbling through his pockets, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills and loose change. He counted the money twice before looking up at her, his expression a mix of embarrassment and resignation. "I don't think I have enough," he said softly, his voice tinged with shame. Emma felt a pang of sympathy. Without a second thought, she smiled and placed the coffee in front of him. "It's on the house," she said gently. The man stared at her, his eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. "You don't know what this means." Emma simply nodded, offering him a reassuring smile before walking away to give him some space. She didn't think much of it. It was a small gesture, something she had done for others before. Yet, as she returned to the counter, a warmth spread through her chest. She couldn't explain it, but helping him felt different, significant in a way she couldn't quite place. The hours passed slowly, the cafe growing quieter as the storm outside showed no signs of abating. The The regulars trickled out one by one, leaving Emma to wipe down the tables and clean the counters. The man in the corner remained, sipping his coffee in silence. He seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant as he stared out at the rain. When he finally stood to leave, he slipped his coat back on and walked toward the door. Just as he reached the threshold, he turned back to look at Emma. His expression was softer now, the lines of worry on his face less pronounced. "Thank you again," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Emma nodded, watching as he disappeared into the night. The door closed with a soft click, leaving her alone once more. Yet, something lingered in the air, a feeling she couldn't quite name. She stood there for a moment, staring at the door, before shaking her head and returning to her tasks. The next morning, Emma awoke to the sound of knocking at her apartment door. Still groggy, she shuffled across the small living room, her pajamas wrinkled from a restless night's sleep. When she opened the door, she was greeted by a man in a sharply tailored suit. He was older, his neatly combed silver hair and polished demeanor exuding authority. "Miss Emma Carter?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. "Yes," Emma replied cautiously, unsure of what to make of the unexpected visitor. "My name is James Porter," he continued, his voice measured and professional. "I work for Mr. Nathan Harrison. He's asked me to deliver this to you." He handed her a sleek, white envelope, its surface embossed with an elegant seal. Emma took the envelope, her brow furrowing. "Nathan Harrison?" she repeated, confused. "I don't know anyone by that name." James offered a faint smile. "Mr. Harrison believes you'll understand once you read the note. He also requests your presence at the address listed inside, should you choose to accept." Before Emma could ask any more questions, James tipped his hat and turned to leave. Disappearing down the hallway, Emma closed the door, staring at the envelope in her hands, her curiosity mounting. She broke the seal and unfolded the note inside. The handwriting was neat and precise, the words carefully chosen. "Kindness never goes unnoticed. Join me at the address below at 3 p.m. today. You won't regret it." Emma stared at the note, her mind racing. Who was Nathan Harrison? And why was he reaching out to her? The memory of the man from the night before surfaced in her thoughts, and a strange sense of connection settled over her. She didn't know what awaited her at this meeting, but something told her she had to find out. The rain had eased by the afternoon, leaving the streets of Riverdale glistening under a pale sun that occasionally broke through the clouds. Emma stood outside the address written on the note, a towering skyscraper in the heart of downtown. Its glass facade shimmered in the faint light, reflecting the bustling city below. Emma clutched the strap of her worn handbag tightly, nerves bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She wasn't used to places like this. The sheer scale of the building made her feel small and out of place. She took a deep breath, adjusted her sweater, and stepped inside. The lobby was immaculate, a sprawling expanse of polished marble floors, modern art installations, and bustling professionals moving purposefully in every direction. Emma hesitated, unsure of where to go, when a receptionist seated behind a sleek wooden desk caught her eye and waved her over. "Miss Emma Carter?" the receptionist asked with a professional but friendly smile. "Yes, that's me," Emma replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Harrison is expecting you," the receptionist said, gesturing toward an elevator bank on the far side of the room. "Take the elevator to the 34th floor. His assistant will meet you there." Emma nodded and made her way across the lobby, her shoes clicking softly against the marble. The elevator ride felt interminably long, the quiet hum of the machinery amplifying the nervous energy swirling within her. When the doors finally opened, she stepped out into a corridor lined with glass walls that offered breathtaking views of the city below. Standing at the far end of the corridor was a well-dressed woman with sharp features and a clipboard in hand. She approached Emma with a professional air. "Miss Carter, welcome. I'm Grace, Mr. Harrison's assistant. He's ready to see you." Emma followed Grace into a large office that exuded understated elegance. The space was bathed in natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows, and the decor was minimalist yet sophisticated. A large wooden desk sat at the center, and behind it stood Nathan Harrison. He was older than Emma had expected, perhaps in his early 50s, with neatly combed salt and pepper hair and an aura of quiet authority. He wore a tailored suit, but his demeanor was approachable. When he turned to greet her, his piercing blue eyes softened with a kind smile. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, stepping around the desk to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming." Emma returned his handshake, her palm clammy with nerves. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Harrison, but I'm not sure why I'm here." Nathan gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the desk. "Let me explain," he began. "Last night, my younger brother Christopher came to your cafe. He's been going through a difficult time, and your kindness left a deep impression on him." Emma blinked, the memory of the man from the night before flashing in her mind. "Christopher is your brother?" she asked, her voice filled with surprise. Nathan nodded. "Yes, he's been struggling for a while now, and it's not often that he encounters people who treat him with genuine kindness. When he came home last night, he couldn't stop talking about you, about how you helped him without judgment or hesitation." Emma's cheeks flushed. "I didn't do anything special," she said softly. "It was just a cup of coffee. To you, it might have been a small gesture." Nathan said, his tone serious. "But to him, it was a lifeline, and to me, it showed the kind of person you are, someone who acts with compassion, even when no one is watching." Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in a setting like this. Nathan leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "I've done some research on you, Miss Carter. I know about your situation, your family, your work, everything you've had to shoulder at such a young age. You've taken on responsibilities that most people would struggle with, and yet you've managed to keep going, to keep caring." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or exposed by his words. "I'm just doing what I have to," she said quietly. Nathan smiled faintly. "And that's exactly why I wanted to meet you. I believe you have potential that's been buried under the weight of your circumstances. I want to offer you an opportunity to change that." Emma's heart raced. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked cautiously. Nathan opened a folder on his desk and slid a document toward her. "I'd like you to come work for me as my personal assistant," he said. "The pay will be significantly more than what you're earning now, and the role comes with benefits that I think will help alleviate some of the pressures you've been facing." Emma stared at the document, her mind spinning. The idea seemed almost too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "There are plenty of people who could do this job better than I could." Nathan shook his head. "I'm not just looking for someone who's good at organizing schedules or answering emails. I'm looking for someone with integrity, someone I can trust. And based on everything I've seen and heard, I believe you're the right person for the job." Emma hesitated. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. Really, it was an escape from the endless cycle of late shifts and financial stress. But it also felt overwhelming, like stepping into a world she didn't belong to. I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's expression softened. "I understand this is a big decision, and I don't expect you to make it right now. Take some time to think about it. Talk to your family, if you'd like, but I hope you'll consider it, because I believe this could be the start of something extraordinary for you." Emma nodded, still unsure of what to say. She folded the document carefully and placed it in her bag. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," she said quietly. "I'll think about it." Nathan stood as she rose to leave, extending his hand once more. "Whatever you decide, Miss Carter, know that the kindness you showed my brother will not be forgotten." Emma shook his hand, her mind still reeling, and left the office. As she stepped out into the busy streets of Riverdale, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. She had been offered a chance to completely change her life, a chance to step out of the shadows of her struggles and into a future she had never dared to imagine. But could she really take the leap? Could she leave behind the familiarity of the cafe and the life she had built for herself, even if it meant something better awaited her? As she walked home, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, a flicker of hope began to grow. The following days passed in a blur for Emma. She couldn't stop thinking about Nathan Harrison's offer and the life-altering implications it carried. Every time she glanced at the document he had given her, a mixture of fear and hope swirled in her chest. It was an opportunity unlike anything she had ever imagined. But it also meant stepping into an unfamiliar world, a world she wasn't sure she belonged to. At the same time, her family weighed heavily on her mind. Her mother, though recovering slowly, still depended on Emma for nearly everything. Liam was on the brink of finishing high school, and college tuition loomed like a shadow on the horizon. Could she risk taking this job, knowing how much her family needed her to remain steady and grounded? One evening, as Emma cleared the dinner table after another modest meal, she decided to share the news with her family. Her mother sat in her usual spot by the window, knitting a scarf with shaky hands, while Liam worked on his homework at the kitchen table. "There's something I need to talk to you both about," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. Her mother looked up, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it, dear? Is everything all right?" Emma hesitated, clutching the folded document in her hands. I was offered a job," she said finally. "A new job. It's with a man named Nathan Harrison. He owns a big company, and he wants me to work as his personal assistant." Liam's head shot up, his eyes wide. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" Her mother's brows furrowed. "What kind of job is this? And why is he offering it to you?" Emma took a deep breath and explained everything. How Nathan's brother, Christopher, had come to the cafe, how she had paid for his coffee, and how that small act of kindness had led to this incredible opportunity. By the time she finished, both her mother and Liam were staring at her in stunned silence. "Well," her mother said slowly, setting her knitting aside, "it sounds like a wonderful opportunity, but are you sure it's legitimate? It almost sounds too good to be true." "I know," Emma admitted. "I thought the same thing, but when I met Mr. Harrison, he seemed genuine, and I've done some research on his company. It's real, and he's well respected. It's just, I don't know if I can leave the cafe and step into something so different. What if I fail?" Liam spoke up, his voice firm. "Emma, you've been carrying us for years. You've worked so hard, and you deserve a chance to do something better. If this is real, you have to go for it. We'll figure out the rest." Her mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've given us everything, Emma. Now it's time to do something for yourself." Their words filled Emma with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For so long, she had been the one supporting her family. But now, they were supporting her in return. She felt a surge of gratitude and determination. The next morning, Emma called Nathan's office and accepted the job. Her first day at Harrison Enterprises was a whirlwind. She arrived at the sleek glass building dressed in her best outfit, a second-hand blazer and a pair of neatly polished flats. The receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her to Nathan's assistant, Grace, who wasted no time getting Emma acclimated to her new role. At first, Emma felt completely out of her depth. The corporate world was a far cry from the cozy corner cafe. She fumbled through schedules, struggled to learn the jargon, and felt like an imposter surrounded by polished professionals. But Nathan was patient. He encouraged her, offering guidance and reassurance whenever she stumbled. He saw potential in her that even she struggled to recognize. As the weeks passed, Emma began to find her footing. She worked late into the evenings, studying company documents and teaching herself the skills she needed to excel. Slowly but surely, her confidence grew. Nathan noticed her dedication and began to trust her with more responsibilities. One afternoon, Nathan called Emma into his office. He was standing by the window, gazing out at the city below. When she entered, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Emma," he began, his tone serious but kind. "I've been thinking a lot about how you came to be here. Your story, your resilience, your compassion, it's inspired me." Emma tilted her head, unsure of where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" she asked. Nathan gestured for her to sit, then leaned against his desk. "You've shown me that small acts of kindness can have a ripple effect, and I want to channel that into something bigger. I've been toying with the idea of starting a program, a foundation, really, that helps people who, like you, have faced significant challenges but have the potential to thrive if given the chance." Emma's eyes widened. "A foundation?" "Yes," Nathan said. "It would provide job training, mentorship, and resources to people who need a second chance. And I'd like you to be the one to lead it." Emma's heart raced. The thought of taking on such a monumental task was daunting, but it also ignited a spark of excitement within her. "Me?" she asked, incredulous. "Why me?" "Because you understand what it's like," Nathan replied simply. "You've lived it, and I believe you have the passion and determination to make it a success." Emma took a deep breath, her mind racing. The idea was overwhelming, but it also felt right. She thought of all the people who had helped her along the way, from her family to Nathan and even the regulars at the cafe. This was her chance to give back, to pay it forward. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady with conviction. "I'll do everything I can to make it work." Nathan smiled, his expression filled with pride. "I knew you would." Over the next year, Emma threw herself into building the foundation, which she named Second Chances. She worked tirelessly, partnering with local organizations, drafting proposals, and recruiting volunteers. There were challenges, moments of doubt and resistance from those who questioned her ability to lead, but Emma persevered. The Foundation's pilot program launched with a small group of participants, including Christopher. Emma watched as they began to rebuild their lives, gaining skills, confidence, and hope. The success of the program quickly garnered attention, and Second Chances grew into a respected initiative that changed countless lives. 5 years later, Emma stood on a stage at a gala celebrating the Foundation's anniversary. The room was filled with supporters, beneficiaries, and her family, who beamed with pride from the front row. Liam was now a college graduate. Her mother was healthier than she had been in years, and Christopher was thriving, his life transformed by the program Emma had helped create. As Emma looked out at the crowd, she felt a swell of emotion. She had come so far from the rainy night at the Cozy Corner Cafe, where a simple act of kindness had set her on a path she could never have imagined. Taking a deep breath, she began her speech. 5 years ago, this foundation was just an idea, a dream born from a small act of compassion. Today, it's a testament to the power of kindness and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. Thank you to everyone who has supported us on this journey. Together, we're changing lives. The room erupted in applause, and as Emma stepped away from the podium, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey was far from over, but she knew one thing for certain: kindness truly had the power to change the world.